Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see a little link down below. You can actually join our little get-together here directly in Zoom if you'd like. If you're here as an attendee and you're seeing a whole bunch of people here in the panel, and you'll watch us talk and you'll think that you know more, and you might. We'd love to have you come and join us and become part of the panel. In fact, we're going to introduce people from the panel later today. We open at 6 o'clock. From 6 to 6:30, 6:40, it's kind of an open discussion. We're figuring technical things out, telling stories, drinking tea and coffee, and that's pretty much it. So it's pretty easy going from 6 to 6:40. Between 6:30 and 6:40, we release the Discord link. That's where a bunch of us go and keep talking about this stuff between shows. 6:40 to 6:45, we do the mic checks. Once we start mic checks, we're not going to add anybody else to the panel. So you need to be here if you want to be part of this panel, and we would love to have you. You want to be here before 6:40 Pacific Standard Time. 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock is general questions. So if you have general questions about media production, virtual meetings, all those things, then you want to 7 to 8 is when we're going to talk about those things. The best time to ask questions is between 6 and 7. So if you get in here early, especially while we're doing mic checks, the best thing to do is start stacking those questions up so that we hit the ground running as we go into it. So we'd love to see 10 or 15 questions in there to get started. So just think about those, think about them all day. And then between 6 and 7, you can add them to the questions, and we'll do the best we can. We can't promise that we'll answer them. We can promise that we'll discuss them. So that's kind of but you're the producer as the attendee. You're producing the show by what you ask and what you vote on. 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, we have usually some certain vertical. So something specific we're going to talk about. Mondays is kind of an all-purpose day. Tuesdays is audio. Wednesdays, video. Thursdays, special guests. Today, everybody's a special guest. All the panelists are special guests. And then on Friday is education. Saturday, we do education as well. Have a longer Q&A and then an hour of education. And then this Saturday, we're going to have 2 hours dedicated to the new Motion and Final Cut releases. We've got Alex Goldner, who's here, but also Steve Bays, Steve Martin, Mark Spencer, our own Chris Fenwick. So we're going to have, and Bill Davis, and a lot of folks that use Final Cut a lot are all going to be here talking about Final Cut and Motion. So I think it's going to be a good couple hours. So if you want to share this to other people, if you think this is something that's useful, and the bigger we get, the more leverage we have, the more cool people we can bring in, and the better the conversation is. You can go ahead and share this. Don't share your own link, share that link to go there. So anyway, that's it. Let's get started. Chris, I know we have some questions. What do we got up first?
Right off the top, James Hutchinson from Dublin. I don't know if that's California or Ireland, but we'll see. The panel often mentions vMix and OBS. I've been using Mimo Live, and I know Oliver's been on the show in the past. Having never used vMix or OBS, I can't make a comparison. Which is your preferred software, and why?
Chris, what's your preferred software?
Well, I will say, and I have been teased by certain members of this esteemed panel. I use Mimo Live. The main reason why I like it is it's in the name. Mimo stands for multiple in and multiple out, and its ability to configure multiple outs, including multiple ISO outs for record, is very attractive to me. My experience with OBS prior to playing with Mimo was during an awkward period where a feature that I really wanted just suddenly stopped working, and I found the kind of open source nature of it troublesome to me. And I understand why people like it, but I kind of like Mimo, and I can get my business to pay for it.
Alex, we can't hear you, Alex. You're muted.
Chuck, you had a comment?
Well, I was going to say hardware, but instead, if you can't do it hardware, I prefer vMix only because I don't have access to Mimo Live yet.
Go ahead, George.
So I forego Mimo Live. I honestly feel if you have a piece of software that can't work across a really recent computer, it's kind of an injustice to not be able to run that without it crashing to the ground. vMix is definitely very attractive right now.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I've got vMix on PCs and OBS on a Mac Mini. If you're coming from broadcast background or have used hardware switches, vMix is a much shorter learning curve for the person doing the switching, and I feel it's a little bit more powerful. OBS, it just feels awkward to use coming from that broadcast background. But if somebody is coming from not having a good budget or any budget and need to get started, it is probably the best choice.
Go ahead, Leland.
I like what Stuart just said, was the fact that these are all tools and they're all part of a toolkit. I've been reviewing these softwares for practically the last 10 years. So it's one of those things that is a workflow situation. Whatever workflow fits your workflow is what you're going to want to use. So if you're doing gaming, OBS is perfect for that. If you're doing, like Stuart said, live production television type broadcasting, you're going to look at vMix. Mimo Live for the Mac user is the perfect solution for a software switcher. So it's really a matter of choice, use, and hardware availability.
Colin, and then Jeffrey, and then Sky.
So Leland touched on this. OBS was adopted by a lot of game streamers, and that's one of the largest contingent of early streamers. So you'll find that OBS is the most used software switching solution out there. And as the most used, it is the most tested and most stable across all platforms, including every modern platform you'd want to consider. It's whether it suits you to pay for your software or to use an open source package with its definably more stable and more reliable, with a longer development history than virtually any of these other competitors, with the exception maybe of Wirecast. Whether you want to use that or something that has commercial support is really a function of how confident you are in your technical ability to deploy these things.
Jeffrey, and then Sky.
The best thing to do is both. Well, OBS is absolutely free, so download it and put it on the system. And vMix, of course, you'll need a PC to do it, or you'll need to run an emulation on your Mac to test it out. But it has a 60-day trial period to it, so you can definitely test both of them out and see which one will work for you. For me, it's pretty much been Wirecast myself, but I also use OBS and I do use vMix. Just like Leland said, it's the right tool for the right job. That's what I use.
Good, Sky.
I would love to learn Mimo Live, but my church ended up using all Windows, so we ended up going from OBS for a 3-camera shoot into vMix. We did have one issue that Leland and I are still looking into, why it blinked out last Sunday, but it may not be vMix. I'm not using nearly as much as it's capable of doing, but it got me streaming almost instantly. That was vMix on Windows.
Good, John.
Mimo Live, I'm going to follow up with what Chris said. It's sort of like a Swiss Army knife of a switcher, only it's made by Germans. It does anything in, anything out, and I really like the motif of being layered, but it does take a while to get used to.
I have to admit, Oliver worked on me for a long time. Like, it was 10 years. It was, I think I talked about it earlier. It was a kind of a green eggs and ham thing where he kept on offering me green eggs and ham, and I was like, I will not, could not. There was a whole lot of no. And then once I tried it, and as soon as my head went around Mimo, I was like, okay, I'm done. I like this, and so, but it is a completely different thing, and I didn't like it because it was completely different. But what I like now is, number one, is the integration with things like Zoom is it's more direct. So there's not some extra thing that I have to do, and it just ties in. And Oliver spends a lot of time on that, making sure that it works as a virtual camera inside of it, and I don't have to have any external pieces to do that. I like it, again, as a Swiss Army knife. I mostly use hardware, but when I use Mimo, it's because I'm trying to just do something simple that I'm trying to push into, typically into Zoom. So that's my biggest use for it, and I find it to be simpler and faster and more flexible all at one time. So I use Mimo because of that. But that took a long time for Oliver to get me to say that, or get me to use it. Was because I was hard. I kept on opening it, not understanding it, and then and OBS drives me absolutely crazy. So I don't use it Anyway, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say one last thing about Mimo is I would totally agree. The user interface is fundamentally wrong. I completely agree. But if you think of it as Photoshop layers for video, all of a sudden it's like, oh, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, Stuart, last word, and then we're gonna move on.
Jeffrey mentioned the 60-day trial period. I think you'll find for the pandemic, they upped that to 90 days for vMix.
That's great. All right, next
I
question.
think they already pulled that back, but it does remain a basic free version for anyone that does try the trial. You'll still be able to play with it as long as you want to.
John Edelson started to look up software for iPhone and iPad, which responds to voice and advances text as you speak it. What software is that? That's from Larry Jacobson.
And the software is, I looked it up. I had to open up my iPad. It's Prompt Smart Pro Teleprompter. And they claim they're the only app that is voice actuated, but there is another group that has it, but it's the same software. They just licensed it.
It's Prompt.
Smart Pro Teleprompter.
Anyway, so yeah.
So as you read, it advances?
Yes, not only as you read it, it advances, but if you go off script, it stops. And when you go back on script, it starts going again. It's really...
Boy, I'm going to file that one under what could possibly go wrong.
Well, I think that the issue
I've used
is
it regularly. It works great, and if you don't have the crew, this is a way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the thing is that we talked about this a little bit before the hour, but having a professional teleprompt, if you have the budget and you have the people, and you should make the budget if you can, a professional teleprompt operator, it's kind of like, why not do everything yourself with your own little piece of software? And you can do that. But when you put professionals in their places in a large event, and all those professionals are paying attention to their part of the field,
Silo.
It's kind of, they're playing their zone, and they're making sure that zone's handled. There are so many things that we're doing on shows where we just had a show last week. The teleprompt operator was changing the script while the event was going on. Like making adjustments, and people are talking into her ear, and she's like, and putting it all together. And so the thing is that having a professional who understands the software, that puts it together, and is working with the script supervisor and working with the other folks that are there and putting all those things out, that's just something you want to have it go away and have that person handle it. When you can't do that, I've been a teleprompt operator for pretty high level people. So that might have been, and so you sometimes do it with your own software. But I will say that I just want to kind of say that said, I really need something that we can send to people, to John's point, that we can't put a teleprompt operator anywhere near them or even in the space. And I need them to be able to read that. So this is an interesting piece of software. Go ahead, Brian, and then John.
Yeah, I've been using it actually since the pandemic hit, because I had to shoot some videos here at home. And what was great about it is we had a couple of iPads, and I had a couple different camera angles, and my wife, who was a talent, could turn from one to the other, and they're both prompting at the same time, following her voice. She could start and stop, as John was saying, and it would pick up wherever she was. So it's been working well for us.
And how are you getting? Is the audio just in the room? Or is the mic open?
Yeah, just the mic on the iPad.
You're not feeding like a clean feed into the.
No, I thought about it, but I'm close enough to her with the cameras that it's working fine. I was shooting on a Canon, and it was just mounted on a DSLR, and it's just mounted right below. So the eye line wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. And the other thing is, I've even had another copy of it running on a phone hidden in a bookshelf. So if she turned over there's a prompter there. So it's been all over the place, and it's just the mics on the iOS devices picking her up.
Yeah, and it's a really, from a voice perspective, it's a pretty easy solution, because you know what words you're looking for. They're saying stuff very close to it. It should be pretty stable. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
John, it says here that it's for iOS and Android. Have you tried both, or has anybody tried the Android version?
I've not tried the Android.
I assume you'll be trying.
I will be trying the Android.
There you go, John.
I would like to say, for me, if you're going to use it yourself, this is the only one to use, because people, when they're trying themselves and are trying to control the speed, they get distracted, and that doesn't work. And the speeds are always constant, and it's very hard to lay out the script. So for me, I'm either going to use this, or I'm going to have a teleprompter operator, because without an operator, people using those automatic teleprompters, even with a hand control, have a hard time being natural and adjusting their speed. But
Yeah,
I go back to the old days where it used to be pieces of paper pushed
Right.
under a camera. So
Courtney and then Brian.
Yeah, I think these have their applications, just especially for YouTube video creators. A couple of places where it can fall down is if you're trying to do something where you have 6 different versions you're going to do, and you have them all, the scripts all in there, the alt version 1, alt version 2, alt version 3. It doesn't know which version you're on. In that case, you're going to have to control it yourself. And they do make most of the bigger name teleprompting softwares, the more expensive teleprompting softwares have the ability to now put a foot control on it. And some television stations, they're too cheap to hire a teleprompter operator because they're doing the news, have foot controls so that the on-air announcer or anchor can operate can operate the teleprompter with their foot. But in live news, you never have to go back and repeat anything or jump around. But
it is just that it creates 2 minds. Like it
Right.
creates 2 minds for the host. That's just that's a horrible idea.
But cheap people are doing it everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and this is the problem is that what we're going to digress just for a second is this is the issue that broadcast is going to have, which is that broadcast has less money. So they skimp and scrape. The product then isn't as good, and it can't compete with the squeeze. So it's broadcast becoming less and less valuable or less and less interesting without a better solution. Makes it less useful. And I think that we're watching it do exactly what we saw print do a decade ago. Brian and then Sky.
So back to the software, I will say it is not perfect. There were moments where Blair would be reading something and it would just stop and we'd have to physically move it and then would pick up again. We were shooting to edit, not streaming, so that it really didn't matter. There's a paid version and a free version. You can play with the free version and you're limited on font colors and you can only get 1 script in there at a time. But the paid version will link to, I think, Box and Dropbox and for sure your Google Drive. So you can write all your scripts, load them in. And so it worked really great for us. But again, is it perfect? No. But if you're shooting to edit, yeah, it was great for us.
Sky?
I just really appreciate Courtney and talking about the value of the human. I mean, the quarterback can't also be the tight end to catch the ball. But a teacher friend of mine who is a professor of psychology showed me a picture of her in her mask and also the shield, and she's also running a class projecting into the room, but she's also supposed to be recording and zooming to people on the outside. And it's like, how many plates do you have to spin to just do your one job that you're trying to do is teach? And it's like, we're in a weird world right now. So these tools are helpful in this weird time. Thank you.
Yep. Next question.
I'm sorry. I was letterboxing myself. I've decided I prefer the 4K look of Sky's shot. I think that's our new stretch goal. Everybody wants to be a little bit letterboxed. Does live stream, this is from Ernie from New York City. And Ernie, hey Ernie, does live stream to and from China require streaming to 2 separate systems, one inside the firewall and one outside?
So you generally, Ernie, do you have a partner in China?
Yes, we were just having a conversation about that, and they were talking about it being, I think WeChat actually would be the one they were going to suggest, and I didn't know if that meant we had to have a second system outside.
So typically, most of the broadcasts that we've done that go into China, we go in a couple different ways. One way is, but almost always it's working with a local partner that is approved by the government to do that. I mean, for the scale of the events that we've worked on, you have to, you're not going to sneak it in, and I'm sure that's probably your case as well. And so there's ways to sneak it in. I wouldn't recommend it. Chinese take it personally. And so the Chinese government does. What we do is work with a local partner, and then we'll either RTMP or set up an HLS, but typically it's RTMP so that we can push it. And so we'll push it into it, and we can push it with captions. We can push it with extra audio channels, so a lot of times we'll send English either English left, Chinese right, or two English, two Chinese, or a bunch of different options. But you really have to communicate with them what you're sending out. So then we RTMP that to them. Then they'll then relay it and stream it out to WeChat or to other Tencent or other things that are there. But they work on the partnerships on that end, and it's an approved connection for an approved event. The other way for you to do it is to put it on SAT. So you can put it up on AsiaSat 5 and bring it down. So what we do is we encode it. We use the switch to get it to Singapore, typically, and then we uplink from Singapore to AsiaSat 5. And then if it's a private stream, then you'll encrypt it, and you'll have to work with the downlink you'll have to send them the bliss to decode it on the way down. But if you want it to be if it's a public release, then you leave it on AsiaSat 5 and you leave it unencrypted, and it means everybody in Asia can get it. So you just have to decide what you're trying to do with that process. Understand that if you do anything funky with the audio channels at that point, it will come out as all kinds of different things in all different countries. so you just have to be very careful about how you do that. But when you put that out, also be clear that Asian news networks will not treat your video the way American news networks will. American news networks don't want to put anything that looks rough on the that looks rough. We have found that when we put it on AsiaSat 5, people will put up all kinds of things, that are coming down, clap tests and everything else. And so we want to make sure that you have a slate up the whole time and you're controlling it, so that when it you give that final bit, it's actually giving just what you want to show, because otherwise it will show up in front of 100 million people. And so the scale of viewership in Asia is profound. It's like if you hit India or China with a AsiaSat 5, there's a lot of people watching, and so it's definitely worth doing. We recommend it to a lot of our clients because there's just so many people, and especially if you're doing a release and you make it available to the public, if you get the timing right and it's a slow news day, the news organizations all over India and China India especially, will just pick it up and put it on air. And we've had stuff where it was estimated that we reached 100 million people with something that the stream only reached maybe a couple million, and so the scale is impressive. So, but that's what I would consider. It's satellite uplink, which is remarkably inexpensive compared to the general production costs. That's the easiest way to get it to your partners. They typically have a downlink. If they're a reputable streaming company, they're all going to have downlinks that they can pull. And then you just have to decide whether it's encrypted or not. That's a lot easier than the RTMP or RTP, send. But that's what we've done in the past. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. On a large scale for like product demonstrations, and you're saying for small shows, point to point via the RMTP would be still an option.
RTMP, yeah.
Or RTMP, sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking
again,
RTC, but no.
Yeah, the most stable way to get it to them is over satellite, but
Right.
you're not going to find any kind of major fiber, solution. There's not any big pipe. You have to find somebody on the inside that you're going to partner with, that you're going to then publish to, and then they're going to take that stream and do whatever. So you're basically sending a mezzanine to them to be redistributed.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Leland?
I was just going to say, there are some services, CDNs out there that have servers in China. I've streamed, like you've mentioned, through WeChat to the China network, you might call it, because you never know where it's going to go. And like Alex said, there is a big danger factor involved with the type of stuff you stream into China, because they consider it propaganda at times. So you just really have to be careful what kind of info you're sending into.
That's why we like to work with partners, there, rather than try to do it ourselves. There are solutions, as Leland said. We just haven't used any of them because it's what we would call fissionable material. And so, you want to have someone there to help you manage that process. Next question.
What does fissionable mean?
We say this a lot when we hand you a record or we're working on something, that if something goes wrong, really bad things happen.
Okay.
We call it fissionable material.
So like it's going to explode upon
as in
itself?
uranium and plutonium.
Gotcha.
So we just say, I'll hand something to someone and just go, this is fissionable material, which means that, you have, don't, it's not just another record. It's, or you're doing something as fissionable, fissionable usually means that it's, it could cause a chain reaction that would be unfortunate for everybody. Anyway, next question.
I'm going to write that one down.
Yeah.
Frank from Ottawa says, can we have a teleprompter second hour sometime?
I don't know. Do you think Courtney would do a second hour on would join us our second hour? Yeah. He's like, yeah. So we'll schedule it. I already have it in my light schedule for one of the Mondays, and I just literally the only reason we haven't done is I just have to ping Courtney and some of the other folks that are doing a bunch of it, and we'll get a roundtable. I absolutely think it's a good subject to talk about. Anyway, next question.
I was writing down visionable material. Roscoe says, for a 4-person crew, audio mixer. Roscoe, I don't know what this is. PLZ operator? I don't.
PTZ, I think. I bet just PTZ.
Possibly. TD and director. What is the preferred size of a multi-view monitor? Does the audio mixer need to see multi-view or just a program feed? I think audio always needs to see cameras myself, because they're looking. They're probably writing and adjusting, and they're looking when somebody is.
We send them multi-view and program. So we usually every audio engineer that we work with gets both the program and the multi-view, at least. And sometimes they get a lot of other feeds because they have to figure out who's talking. Like, it's they're live. They're live. If they're blind, they can see a person walking up and they can anticipate things, so that you don't have that. One of the things that you get with audio engineers that can't see it is someone walks up to the podium and the first couple words are cut off because they didn't see them walking up to the podium. So it's, and when people are walking towards stage, they can anticipate cues by being able to see what's going on.
I would say if my audio engineer doesn't want a multi-view, I don't want them as an audio engineer.
I don't know if I go that far. I've never had one that didn't, but I only, I don't work with that many audio engineers. And so but all the audio engineers that I work with have always wanted to be able to see what they're doing. Jeff, and then Stuart, and then Chuck.
Another option for the audio person is a clear view of the stage if they're in the same room, or just a wide shot static camera.
Yep, absolutely. And we typically give them a couple 24-inch monitors, but on larger installs, we'll put 55s, 55 4Ks, and send them a whole bunch of signals so they can see what's going on. They like it. Someone else, Chuck, did you have your hand up?
You just said it. I was just going to say 24-inch monitors, or we use 55s, and either a DA the multi-view out to them, or use a couple of Blackmagic multi-view.
We definitely don't do really small ones. One thing we do like to do is we like to give them a monitor that has audio and video embedded in it. And the reason for that is, it can be like a Sony color accurate or something, but the reason that that's useful is they can check sync. You can't check sync if you're getting audio from one source and video from another. So having something that pops the audio up and there's a headphone jack in it, just to lets them, check their sync if they need to. Go ahead, Stuart.
It says 4-person crew, so I'm assuming it's a pretty small room or back of a vehicle of some sort. I would say as big as practical, as big as you can fit in there. If you can use a wall with a projector, that's better than having somebody getting tired by looking at small images on a screen.
Yep, right? Absolutely. Next question.
And there goes the cat five.
Thanks. Next question.
Stepping into a little Mukana R&D here. Sorry if this has been asked before, Paul Shadwell says. When a question is accepted by the host in Mukana, it disappears. Is there a way to see the list of host accepted questions before they are answered?
We're still thinking about how to communicate what those things are, and we just don't have a solution yet. So
yeah, I'd love it if people could still vote on it when it's in my queue here.
It gets complicated when that happens.
Sure it does.
So we're trying to, but we are trying to figure that out.
Back to our regularly scheduled program. Tim McKean says, when you're sending out equipment kits to clients, is there a special way you package them to keep things together, cut foam, etc., or do you just drop ship new items direct from the vendor? Are there advantages to either approach?
We do both. We do a lot of different sizes. I think right now we're in the process of, between the big kits and the medium kits and the small kits, I think we're sending out 40 kits this week. So they're all different sizes. And so mostly what we try to do is pack them into one box and send them out with instructions on how to put them together. That's our attempt. And the hard part is that we tend to change our kits every single time. So there's not, we're improving them, we're making them better, we're deciding that something needed to be changed or whatever. So it requires, and we haven't ramped up this much until recently. And so basically we set a requirement for all of our clients that they had to take the kits or we didn't want to work with them. So that made things a little tighter. That's why we're doing a lot of kits now. Because I'm just tired of watching bad Zooms. Anyway, so we do drop ship when we need to at the last minute. We can drop ship pieces of kits to people. It just gets much more confusing because things are showing up at different times. We have to make sure that it's all there before we have a call with them. There's a lot of other bits and pieces. It's just nice when they get it all together and it's been tested and it's been set up. The bigger kits have to be sent together because, like a kit with a Countryman like this with a mix pre with noise assist with like all that has to be pre-configured. In that case, even pre-configuring the name for the person so that when they hit record on the mix pre that the files come back with their name on them. So those kinds of things get, kind of worked out. But we prefer them all to go out in one piece with instructions. And then we'll follow up with a half an hour of making sure that it looks right and sounds right. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, just a plus one on that. If I could avoid it in general, I wouldn't drop ship anything but an individual component. If you have headphones that, clearly go in a headphone place, sure, you can drop ship that. But as far as the assembly and, the quality control, I would avoid it if you can. As far as packaging, pelicanfoam.com is expensive but works really well. If you want custom, cutouts for a case, yeah, that's what I got.
If you want to send something out that you want to rent, that then we use Pelican cases for that. But usually, I mean, a lot of our kits are lost items. Like they just go out and don't come back. It's just part of doing it's cost of production. So then we're slowly spreading the everyone looking good and sounding good as we do more events. All right, next question.
So Mr. Larson from Sweden says, does anyone have any comments about StreamYard? It's really easy to use, only a web tool, but seems to be the right tool for most users who don't need to mess with OBS and
Go
the
ahead,
like.
Colin?
I know a lot of people who use StreamYard in combination with OBS. But yes, it's a convenient beginner tool. I would not do any sort of serious production using it. It implements a rather convenient call-in system. It's all WebRTC based. It allows you to present comments from YouTube and Facebook very conveniently for discussion as a lower third and that kind of thing. It's a good tool for casual streams that you're doing. I've used it quite often with a group of 3D printing enthusiasts that get together a couple of times a week, and we'll just have people drop in and chat and then take off and have a rotating panel for several hours. It's very convenient in that regard.
Sorry. I know that there's a lot of, for corporate, where you're having a bunch of people talking to each other, you might want to throw up some graphics. You might want to, of course, have those comments. I think it's actually a pretty useful tool, and I've talked to a lot of corporate partners that use it extensively. And so it's a pretty popular app because it's easy to put together, and it does the thing, right? I think that if you're trying to do anything really creative, I don't think it's probably it. But if you want something that's on rails, that the process of getting someone up to speed is relatively low, I think that it works pretty well. Go ahead, Leland.
One expansive component to StreamYard being a WebRTC platform is it still allows for virtual cameras as well. It doesn't have its own, like you can't go into StreamYard and use a virtual camera elsewhere, but you can use vMix inside StreamYard or OBS inside StreamYard. So you can enhance the production quality. The thing we like about StreamYard is it was written by two very capable coders, and it was written very well. It's a very stable platform compared to some of the others like BeLive, and we've had issues with Stage 10 and Go Lightstream, but this one is tested out pretty well over the last couple of years. So it's
also, if you get an account that streams to LinkedIn, it streams to LinkedIn, which is an unusual API call right now. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, thanks. We've actually been testing out StreamYard here. We actually got put onto it by Laurie Gill. I asked her how she does her show, and she said we use StreamYard, and we've been trying it out, and it's really good. They've done some upgrades recently where you can now have 10 participants in it, and on the pro version, it's now gone up to 1080p as well. So they keep up in the quality of it a little bit. But I'm now thinking about what else I'm going to add to my system here and how that will work with StreamYard, and whether there's other options that may actually be cheaper because they're bound up in another thing I want. So I'm kind of looking at all the options and all the packages and see which one I finally end up with.
That makes sense. Next question.
Just with regards to that, real quick, keep in mind you're either going to pay a subscription price for a platform like StreamYard, or maybe make a one-time purchase for software, and then you never pay a premium over the course of time. It's all dependent on which.
Next question.
Esborn also says, but now it says from Japan. That's weird. Has Alex shown a teardown of his teleprompter, a Telestrator yet? I've missed the past week's sessions.
No, it's been a busy couple weeks. Keep on, every time I get close to it, I keep on. We used up all my cables the other day, so I had to take all my cables into the office. We're just growing really fast and dealing with a lot of different pieces. And I keep on. We were the shipment of another 1,500 feet of BNC hadn't showed up yet. It shows up today. So I'm gonna be hopefully working on that over the weekend. So, but I don't know when hopefully I'll get to it. I just keep on pushing stuff back in while we wait for the shipments to show up. Anyway, what were you gonna say, Chris?
I was going to go to the next question.
Go to the next question.
Bobby Spangler says from Kentucky, beautiful state. Do Canon cameras work as a webcam for Zoom when loaded with their webcam utility firmware? I had heard that Zoom doesn't see those cameras.
Go ahead, Jason.
It does, but you're very limited on which you actually end up using. So be sure that your camera is properly supported. Be sure that it shows up on Canon's website. If not, you're in for a world of hurt.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, the same thing. I noticed that Canon keeps putting out updates to the drivers, but some of the older DSLRs do not function. I still have a 5D Mark II that I can't find software for. And then the newer Canon HDMI out simple camcorders do work as well.
Are you printing something?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's on a network and somebody launched it. My apologies.
I was like, is that a printer? They use those in the last decade a lot. In the last, they're very popular. Anyway,
I have one
Jeffrey.
client that loves scripts on paper, and he's over and he's about to work. Sorry.
Got it. Okay, it's fine, Jeffrey.
As long as it's not a dot matrix printer, we're fine.
Yeah.
I already forgot what I was going to say. Go on past me. I completely lost my train of thought.
Leland and then Beju. Then we're going to move on.
For those with Canon and Nikon cameras, there is an application out there called SparkoCam. I'll leave a link for it. It basically, you'll see it looks like.
Oh, you faded out.
That was an audio follow video.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that's correct. Anyway, I'll put the video. That's my new setup. So I'll put the link in the chat. It's written specifically for Canons and Nikons to be able to be used as virtual cameras. It has a lot of other cool features with it as well.
Beijing.
Yeah, just quick point that if you use the USB driver, you're getting a very comparatively low resolution, no more than 720p. And as Leland mentioned, there is SparkoCam for Windows and there is Cascable Webcam for Mac as an alternative to using the Canon webcam drivers, which maybe give a little bit more control. I'll put the link to the other in there.
Perfect. Next question.
John Well from Midvale says, thank you for your answers yesterday about the audio privacy between adding a bleep sound and or silence. Today,
how many places could you ask a question about the bleep? And I think we went on for like 5 or 10 minutes.
We probably went 4 minutes too long.
Today,
thinking about video privacy for something like obscuring names or addresses from a recorded iPhone shared screen, is the Final Cut blur sufficient, or what would you recommend?
There's a bunch of, I think that there are some. Does Final Cut have one that tracks? Is there a tracker that you can?
So as is the case with many Final Cut solutions, Final Cut has tons of extensible, third-party filters. There's definitely a few that track. I know that Roger down in Australia, Coremelt has a couple or some solutions, and there's a lot of ways to do it.
You're looking for something. Yeah, you just need something that tracks, and a lot of those have worked pretty well. Bill, and then Sky. Yeah, the tracker space is pretty heavy. In fact, there's some new things I think that are coming out right now. They're supposed to increase. I think the M stuff that is done by, oh gosh, I can't remember who it is, but there's a lot of tracking
third-party stuff that's being worked for.
I
Final
think
Cut.
what happened in the Final Cut world is that Mocha made their tracker licensable, and a bunch of people are using it.
And I think the one that I use is Ripple Trainings, Ripple Effects or whatever. Ripple. It's Steven and Mark Spencer's has a little tracker with a little thing, and I've used it for cloning, but I think it also does blur. I used it for a lot of cloning.
I just cloned a bunch of light switches out of a guy's home video the other day.
Yeah.
That was actually my job on Deadliest Catch, was to blur out anything that wasn't paid for, and that was the last pass before the lawyers said, yeah, that logo, it needs to go. So we would then have to choose whether to blur it very softly, and we would also mat it and then track it around, and that was all done inside the Avid DS. But I know Media Composer also has a really good tracker for that, because they do a lot of serial and series in the television world. But it's the question of, do you mosaic it or do you just blur it, and also faces that you don't have rights to. So those are often tools that we use, again, in the Avid world.
Jason, real quick, and then we're gonna move on.
Speaking of 3D trackers, as of yesterday, you can now pre-order Motion VFX's long-awaited 3D tracker, and it's $100 off.
That's great. Next question.
12 questions in 16 minutes. Tim McKean says, most prompters shoot through the glass and the image is reflected in the glass. I've seen others where the display was tinted and came through the glass, and the camera was mounted below and captured the reflection. Can you talk about the performance differences between the two design approaches?
That sounds crazy.
That sounds crazy. Yeah, I was gonna say
like I don't like shooting through the mirror. I wouldn't do that. I can't imagine that the performance shooting a reflection would be better than shooting through. I can't like it. Like I can't.
If nothing else, it's a reflection. Everything is backwards now.
Well, I just think that would be super complicated to get a clean frame. I would never shoot it that way. So I've never actually seen it that way. I mean, we've done it. So we've done reflections for 3D. So if we're doing 3D cameras and each camera is too big, so you can't put them side by side and still maintain interocular distance, we'll put one camera going straight and the other camera going through a beam splitter. But that's like a really expensive rig that is not trivial to set up, and I wouldn't consider it a standard broadcast rig for teleprompters. Bill?
Yeah, the tenting is important, because if you have any glare coming in the sides between the beam splitter and the lens.
Yeah, the tenting I get, but they
just asked the question. Yeah.
I know, but I'm saying the tenting you have to have for everything. But I think the question though at hand is the reflection versus shooting through the glass. I would always shoot through the glass. I would never shoot a reflection unless I had to. The only time I would do that is for a 3D camera. Jeffrey, really quick, and then we'll move on.
Well, I'm missing the idea of how this works. Is this like those little panels, like when you see the president talk, you see those two panels on the side, or
that's a reflected prompted image.
Yeah. Anyway, shoot through the glass. I think that's shoot through the glass. Oh, next question.
And also, can I say real quick, in post, a lot of times producers will just say, "We'll just flip the image." You've got to be really careful about that, because if people know the people on camera, they know that person looks different. Don't flip images. It's bad.
Right and left side of your face are different, and
absolutely.
And people will. It is weird when you see someone. And then the other thing you have to deal with is you never thought that logo would be in the shot, or text that suddenly reversed.
Even if it isn't, a person's face flipped is not the same person.
And it's, again, you'll recognize. Here's what you have to be careful of: is not what people notice; it's what they feel. And so when you flip someone's face, they will feel different to them, and that creates this underlying low-level distress for someone. There's lots of things we have to think about in production that aren't about whether people notice it or whether they wrote a complaint. We get a lot of clients that say, "Well, no one complained," or "Everyone was watching," or You know, it's not. But the question is when you try to sell them on the next one, are they going to come back? Are they going to think that this was a great experience? Are they going to notice? Like when I used to work on physical seminars, and we had 200 people in the room or whatever, and every single chair was exactly 1 inch apart, like spaced, and we used to run lines across it to make sure all the backs were all exactly the same, and everything was extremely refined as we went through all that, because it made a difference. When you walk in, it feels different. The room feels different than when it's a little off. No one's going to complain about it. No one's going to notice it. No one's going to talk about it. But it feels different when someone walks in, and that's the thing you want to kind of keep up in mind when you're working on these productions. Next question.
Real quick one. Can someone put a link for the Countryman mic that Alex is using? Yeah, there you go, Alex. Sold out worldwide.
Yeah,
Thanks to
exactly.
you.
It's a Countryman H. I bought them all. I bought 22 yesterday, so I have my supplies. So now I can tell you that it is the H6. It's the Countryman H6.
How many Alexes is it? How many Alexes?
Not quite an Alex.
Collins?
It's not quite an Alex, but it's a lot of Collins. I think it's like, yeah, it's a lot. It's like 70 Collins or something.
It's
like
about
that.
100 Collins. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not 100 Collins. It's like 75 Collins. All right, next
Victor
question.
says, to use the new 48 kilohertz option in Zoom, do we have to have the audio interface set to 48 kilohertz as well?
Jeff Francis.
I'd say, Victor, that's a good question. No, you don't have to. Whether it makes an audible difference is something we need to test, because it's got to do AAC conversion or whatever codec they're doing. So it's going to do sample rate conversion there anyways. So that's a good question.
I would continue that by saying we've had problems with sample rate conversion in the past. So consider yourself warned.
Yeah. Next question.
Okay. Mike, this is weird. Are you using the Brother P Touch Cube Plus PT P710BT blue label printer on a Mac with Catalina over Bluetooth? I can't get the Bluetooth connection to work.
So I'm using the Plus. Yeah, the Cube Plus. That's a really long one, but I'm using the Cube Plus, but I use it over Bluetooth with my phone. So when I use it with the computer specifically, I plug it in over USB-C. I've never tried to use my computer to the Cube. The Cube is amazing, by the way, because you can just carry it around. You charge it up, and then it's like a battery. It's battery operated. You can just set it down and be printing labels and from your phone. And so it's a great little app to print lots of labels. Great little program. The app on the computer has about twice as many features as the one on the phone. So I do plug it into the computer for some of my printing, but I always do it with USB-C. Just because it's not because something didn't work. It's just I never thought of using Bluetooth with my computer to the Cube. I always just go, my computer's here. I'll hook it up with USB-C, and then I don't.
I get the impression that only the mobile works, even though they have drivers for Mac. It must be not working Catalina.
I've just never tried it. Next question.
Fun little toy. I'm shocked you had the answer to that. Just like I thought this was just like we're gonna move on, and you're like, well, let's go into it.
Yeah, exactly. There it is.
Here's the drivers.
It is the best. Yeah, no, look at that. See, mine's in the office, so I can't pick mine up and show it to you. Yeah, but that Cube is, and get the Plus, don't get the regular one. There's a Cube one that's like $30 less or $40 less. Don't do it.
Arm's reach even.
Yeah. So these are, but they're amazing. They're really. They just hit the market really just right with that little box. All right, next question. See, look at this. And Chris didn't even know. He was like, I don't even know what he's talking about. And we're pulling him up and showing him all. Anyway, next question.
At least a few times a week, I'm like, why am I here? I don't belong here. Why haven't they asked me to leave yet?
Yeah.
I don't
like having the keyboard because that's the quickest way to get a label out.
Ricky Gore from Nashville, Tennessee says, recently Microsoft Teams and Skype have stopped working with virtual cams. Only solution so far is going back to previous versions. Any other ideas?
Dropping Skype. I finally did my last show. I keep on saying this, but we're breaking the system down today. We're getting rid of the Skype system today. So Skype is a dumpster fire. Jeffrey?
My understanding is A, that's a Mac issue, not a PC issue, and B, that goes across the board, and it's more than just Skype and Teams.
Well, I mean, Zoom does it perfectly. The only problem with Zoom is that it can't see a deck link card for an output. If Zoom had a deck link out, could do a clean feed out of a deck link card over SDI, holy smokes, would that be a big deal? Like every broadcaster would just standardize. All right, next question.
Hold on, I'm ordering a printer.
Hurry up. We're running out of time.
Stuart says at the end of the first hour, can we see Alex's screen grab of the rearranged Zoom Multiview?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll take a picture of it and then post it. Yeah, show it. All right. I'll show it. Yeah.
Gabriel from Malaysia says, what's the use of an EDID manager like Dr. HDMI. When do I use it, and which part of the signal chain do I place it in? Thanks.
Jason.
It's self-explanatory once you understand what it is. An extended display identification data is EDID, and it's the two-way communication between a display and a source that basically says, I can do this resolution, this is my delay, these are the resolutions that I support, and the color depth and what have you, and it is the two-way handshake. So anytime you have a mismatch, that's what it's for.
All right. Go ahead, Chuck, and then Dave.
Yeah, for instance, I have one of the first generation ATEM 1MEs, and that takes over the EDID on my entire chain. So I just have to set everything to match that. The only other time I've had problem with EDID is using some Atlona HD base T products. Sometimes some of those have dip switches to set the EDID settings.
Dave?
A lot of times switchers and routers won't keep feeding consistent EDID to your source. So when you're switching back and forth between things, the source will change resolution because it doesn't know what it's allowed to feed out. And a lot of these will lock that resolution in so that it just keeps feeding the resolution you want to the device upstream.
Next question.
I love the thing. It's called HD Fury. Mike Andrews says, how many of us have signed up for a license for Mimo Live? I did. Okay, handful. Yep. Victor says, should the shading of a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K or 6K work if ATEM Mini Pro is being used without a computer?
Jason.
The answer is absolutely. Yeah, of course.
It should be applied. I don't know how it would work. Like you can't actually shade the camera.
You can't adjust it, can you?
Well, you can shade it and then you can quit it. But other than that, no, it shouldn't.
You can also use the hardware panel.
Ooh. Really?
Where? Wait, what?
That would be
ATEM
funny.
Mini? Huh?
No. You could use the hardware shading panel with the ATEM Mini. Yeah, it would work.
The $3,000 panel on the $300 switcher. Okay, yeah.
That's like
only way to shade the 6K.
Right.
That's
this
like putting,
goes
that's like
back to our discussion of the other day, where do you want to spend $300 on a switcher? Do you want to spend $1,700 on a switcher that'll give you at least 4K output when you're buying multiple 4K or 6K?
No, Colin, you still lost that one.
Yeah, you still lost that one. All right, next question.
James Babbitt from San Diego says, how do you arrange a monitor to keep the screen in view while the eyes seem to be looking into the camera?
You put a piece of glass over it at a 45-degree angle that's silvered, and then you tent the camera, and then you call it a teleprompter. Like that's how, I mean, the main thing is that I like it to go over the screen as opposed to under the screen. I think that looking slightly over is more natural to look at, and literally you set it right on top. I set it like right on the lens, or right like a 1/8 inch above the lens. I'll suspend it. So it sits right over that lens. The closer is, then the other thing to remember is the further the camera is away and the more you zoom in, the more your eyes will look like it's looking right into the monitor. So as the camera gets closer and the monitor gets closer to you, your eye looking down is going to be more apparent. As that camera moves away, it's going to look more and more like you're looking straight into the camera with the monitor above it or below it. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm supporting that. Shot geometry is very important. Don't move a camera close and then expect to not see those micro eye movements and the looking above.
And that's the same problem with teleprompters too. You get too close or the teleprompter is going too wide and you start seeing scanning. So as it moves away, you're getting more and more out of the peripheral and making sure the person doesn't have to move their eyes very much to see the text. Next question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm showing the wrong feed.
You're really slowing the whole thing down here.
I know. What mic is Alex using today?
I'm using a Countryman H6. Next question.
Moving on. Barry Brimmer from welcome back. How's the audio now? How did you fix your sync problems? I think we're invested in this now from A. Mitchells.
I don't know if it is in sync or not. It may be a little bit off, but I changed basically still off. Bad?
Better, but off.
Much better than it was.
Yeah, the chain is entirely different. Well, I'm actually using a 2019 MacBook instead of an older version. And the reason I thought it was the cable because I did think it was cable at first, was because I changed out the HDMI cable, but then I left the frame and let it run for a while. And as it ran, it was not caching on an older computer. So when I came back, it looked like it was in sync pretty well. So I thought it was cable. Then I got rid of that because it wasn't the cable.
You
Then
look
we
like
get
you're
the-
in perfect sync to me over here. I haven't seen a single sync issue since you started talking.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm
We
gonna
see it. I mean, I see
contribute
it.
that to
Yeah,
Zoom.
it looks pretty
And maybe it's my Bluetooth. I'm wearing
Could be.
Bluetooth headphones though, so maybe I've got a perfect
Yeah,
balance.
you
of
guys,
delay
you guys,
that's
you guys
working.
are in sync there. Go ahead, Sky.
I'm just curious if you are running the ATEM right into your laptop, which is what I've done, and I bypassed the bridge.
I'm going from ATEM into laptop, but there's a
USB-C?
Yeah.
Yeah. I bypassed the bridge, and I'm wondering if that helps.
We've definitely seen sync issues with anything other than a cable going between the ATEM Mini and the computer. So if there's anything, any kind of hub, any kind of split, any kind of anything else, we're seeing delays.
So could that be the little bit that you guys are seeing, but then somebody else is not seeing?
No, I think that there's only one person not seeing it, and that's because he's using Bluetooth headset. So I think that all of us are seeing it other than Leland. So he doesn't. He's statistically not important.
That
in
was my point. That was my point. It was supposed to be intended as a joke because I was off. You were off.
Leland, you're just unimportant.
No. In this conversation, he's statistically not important. He is very important for the rest of the conversation.
Maybe it's a time zone
exactly. All right, Vipul, and then Bill, and then Jeffrey, real quick.
But then Leland should see all others off sync if he's finding.
And he probably does. He probably does. Bill?
There's a lot of them that will be.
If his Bluetooth delay is putting the rest of it in sync, that's pretty amazing as a coincidence.
I know. Exactly. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
In defense, I am using Bluetooth too, and I saw it out of sync. But the other question was that I'm noticing that you're also seeing. I'm seeing some frame rate issues on your video, and then that does bring it. It just moves it around on where the sync is.
In general, one thing we've definitely identified is that the Mini cannot be plugged into any kind of hub. It has to be plugged directly into the computer. It's just you can't hub the Mini. You can hug it, but you can't hub it, so anyway. All right, last question.
Tim McKean from Arizona says, has anyone had experience capturing with the tiny Insta360 Go camera?
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I have. I mean, I've used a fair bit of 360-degree cameras over the years. I loved the Panono. It was very expensive, and it kind of didn't age well. It is a just fine thing. The Ricoh Theta also works very well. The higher end one, I agree with Alex, is a fantastic unit. I would go with that if you can afford it.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I have a 360 1X, and I used it last year when I went to Korea. I got a lot of those videos up on my YouTube where I used it as a secondary camera, so it kind of looked like a jib shot or a drone shot. There was one food show that I went to that I hovered over all the cakes and the pastries, and it really looked like there was a drone flying over. It's an amazing thing if you're using it right in a great way.
Okay. We are now shifting gears. We're going to we'll open the questions. I don't know if we'll get to any. I'm just warning you because we haven't done this before. This is a new experimental format. So there's been a request that people actually know who's talking, like who is actually here, like what do they actually do? That's been the like why should we actually listen to these crazy people? So we decided to go ahead and give this a shot. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around. Right now there are how many actual? It's the 33. So I think it would be safe to say that each of you have about 1.5 minutes to let people know what you do. So we'll start working through it. I'm going to work through it. I know that the I'm going to work in it. It'll seem random, but it's the order that I found myself in. Because I was moving all these panes around. So I was grouping all the ones that are in color, and then I was grouping ones based on lighting. And I'm having so much fun with my dragging the little things around that it's been a little chaotic. Go ahead, Sky.
Can Leland? Oh, you do have a timer up there. That's great. That will help me try to stay in under the minute and a half. Thank you.
And I promised, hold on, to show. Before we do this, real quick, we'll have a minute or two if we keep it to 90 seconds. I promised to show the my screen that I was playing with here. Looks like Chris is asleep in this capture, but sorry, Chris. But here we go. Okay, everybody does everyone know how to do fake smile? Does everyone do a fake smile? Okay. Hold on, we'll do that. Give me 1 second.
I have a copy of the old one we did somewhere.
No, that's fun. So this is the. So that's the. I'm going to hold this against all of us. So anyway, so I started doing kind of like grays that look similar to each other, and then ones with different lighting. And so I just kind of was just playing around with all of these. There's no other real order to them other than playing around with it. I do think, though, that it doesn't bother me that these are different. In fact, it makes it easier for me to identify people. It's also a simpler background makes it much easier for me to see people raising their hand. That's one thing I noticed is that it is a much easier when people have a busy background. When I'm looking at 30 some folks. Busy backgrounds, underlit backgrounds, etc. It's just harder for me to glance and see those backgrounds. So it's just interesting puzzle. Anyway, all right. So we're gonna now go ahead and we are going to jump from person to person. You'll have about 90 seconds. Leland is providing the stopwatch, and we'll go ahead and if you we'll put the questions up, but you'll have to. You'll have to ask them very quickly for that person if that comes up, and we'll see if they run out of time, they run out of time. Otherwise, we won't get to all of them. So,
if we take the 90-second clock to 60 seconds, we will have a little time for questions.
Yeah, why don't we do it? You just have to ask them very quickly because you'll have 60 seconds, so we won't get to it. And make sure to put the person's name in front of it. And if we don't get to it at the beginning and we end up with a little time, we'll do it. So let's lower that, Leland, to 60 seconds. Go ahead, Phil.
Can we do any links? To support what we're talking about?
You can if you want to put it in the chat. It's fine. I'd rather just have it just be like I think it'll get too complicated. Just talk about what you do. Yeah, let's stay away from the links right now. This isn't. I guess I'm trying to keep it away from just being like a promote your business and more of a just talk about what you do. And you can say what you do and what company you work for or whatever or what you're doing. But I'd prefer it not to be kind of a that kind of thing.
Give your elevator bio kind of thing is what it is.
Yeah, just what you worked on and what you biography. Do. Yep. I'll give it a shot. So as soon as you start the countdown, I'll go for a minute. All right. So I started in radio, worked at a small radio station, and became program director, music director. Then I also worked at Sony. From there, I worked in games and legal animation before working at Lucasfilm on Star Wars, and then I went to Industrial Light and Magic. I worked on a couple other movies after that, and then started the Pixel Corps, first DV Garage and then the Pixel Corps. And what we did is we basically built training for people. I wanted to train the world on how to do visual effects. Collected a couple thousand people who were much like this, except without the video, where we did collaborative work together. And that led to lots of production work for corporations and lots of live streaming, done live streaming all over the world. And I now I kind of architect and manage complex live events for the web. And then I also spend a fair amount of time hanging out with a bunch of cool people talking about tech. So that's me in 60 seconds. All right. Hasmukh, next.
I used to buy and sell webcams. I don't do that anymore. I'm a trained medical doctor. I gave up medicine in '89 and have been involved in IT ever since. In my country, South Africa, I've always been interested in how technology can assist in the development and building up the skills and closing the gap between those who were left behind and those who are with high capital. Currently, I established something called MobiLearn, a non-profit company. We create training videos for our population in multiple languages teaching them how to use the mobile device beyond entertainment and social media. So we're trying to turn the mobile device into a mobile classroom, and that's what we do. Thank you very much.
That's great. Jeff Francis.
I am a recording engineer by trade and started in the 90s in New York City working for the classical division of Sony Music, cutting my teeth on early digital audio, so the early high-bit digital audio. I got into education from there as an adjunct at McGill University, and that led me down here to South Carolina, where I work for the University of South Carolina and a School of Music. I'm a recording engineer, teach audio classes, and I'm a freelance engineer and do some multi-camera video shoots. Also a bass player and part-time music leader at my church. So that's all that. Thanks.
Jason.
Oh, okay. Hello, my name is Jason Bache, and after I finished college, I started a company instead of getting a job in 2009. That became Nerds Limited, and it has been my sole source of income ever since. Over the years, I've been an insane generalist, doing what began simply fixing MacBooks and has since turned into a whole bunch of different media endeavors that somehow managed to get me paid at the end of the day. It has adapted in ways that I didn't even know were possible. For example, in 2014, I presented at the National Association of Broadcasters teaching journalists how to use drones. Subsequently, the year after that, I thought, well, wait a minute, there's no way to do property releases for drone pilots. So I created an iOS app called Legal Flyer that does exactly that. It really has kind of been all over the gambit.
Thanks. Great. Thanks. Ernie, next.
Thank you. I got my start in radio as well and was doing on-air and then promotions. So the idea of events through the idea of entertainment with concert promotions and online giveaways that get me up to New York City, and then moved into agency life. So I was on Madison Avenue for about 15 years and what was experiential marketing. Last year, I found it out on my own to start a company called Studio 5x5. And most recently, obviously, with everything that's happening, the shift toward online events and virtual events is really exciting. So I'm trying to stay positive, and I'm inspired about what we're talking about here to make online events, or the virtual part of online of regular in-person events, a standard. Improving what could be the second screen for in-person events, and for those, and the breadth of opportunity with online events could really grow what we've been doing. So there's a lot more interactivity. The technology obviously is very interesting, and then remembering what we produce as part of the show. So I'd be interested as an executive producer in working with everyone on the screen here to try to do bigger, better shows. And so I'm interested in trying to work with and pitch and co-promote. And if you want a hand on a show, I'm available.
Awesome. Thanks, Ernie. Sky.
There we go. So in 2016, when the doctor says you've got a 33 millimeter golf ball in your head, that changes your world. And the tumor that says benign became my new favorite. Benign became my new favorite word. So after 15 years of being in Los Angeles, working in television and feature films, I took that experience and also the 15 years of theater, traveling around the world to 23 different countries and 14,000 performances of storytelling, and wanted to get at the beginning of story. So I ended up learning about story because that's ubiquitous to all this technology that's going to change by whatever somebody wants to sell you. So that's why I'm very excited about community. And when you said community is king versus content, well, content is king because that's the person that said it is somebody making content. But community is what's going to keep us together. And that's why I'm grateful for Hasmukh. Namaste, for Guy, for Jeff, for Alex, for George, for Mickey, for Leland, for Jeff, for Chris. Alex, thank you for making this sandbox happen. Happy to play in it.
Good to have you. Thanks, Guy. John Edelson.
Good morning. I'm a professor emeritus. That means I'm supposedly retired, but my retired day job is working as a tech advisor to the California State Parks doing electronic field trips. My teaching was done at CSU Monterey Bay. It's now 25 years old. I was one of the founding faculty members there. But before that, I was at Chico State, the #1 party school. My academic background is a degree in broadcasting, educational psychology, and industrial engineering. My first video conference professionally was in 1978 via satellite. I first saw a video phone in the 1963 World's Fair. So I've been around this space looking at how technology can help in education. Started a software firm for a while, only made money selling the firm, never selling our software. So I went back to the university. My probably most famous claim to fame is that I was Zoom client number 3. And now I support a senior management member of the Zoom team as he shelters in place here in Monterey.
Jeffrey Powers. Thanks, John. Oh, can't hear you, Jeffrey. Still can't hear you. We've lost you, Jeffrey.
Jeff is using ASL during his 1 minute.
Okay, we'll go on. George Kennedy.
George, I was born in Georgetown, Guyana, decorated U.S. Navy veteran, Desert Storm, graduate University of DC, BA Mass Media Arts, Television Productions. I've been head of production of my small business since 1998, producing content in the video and live production space throughout the DC area, US and beyond. When I'm not doing all these things to support myself, I find time to run District Digital Creatives, which is a user group out of the DC area. That's it.
Awesome, George. Thanks. Chris Fenwick.
I started making television shows, broadcast television shows 35 years ago before I even wanted to touch a computer. I was working on a show about computers, and that's what got me interested in computers. Now I make everything with the computer, obviously. I'm an editor. That's basically all I do. Every day I sit right here and I cut video. I got out of broadcast because there's better money in corporate video. As it turns out, corporations care more about their image than broadcasters do. And so there's better money. They care more and they'll pay more. So that's why I do that. And recently I've been working with John Preto, helping him start a company that he's going to talk about later.
Very good. Thanks, Chris. Jesse Mills.
Hey, everybody. My name is Jesse, living in the Bay Area. Went to school for recording sound in the studio, so early days of Pro Tools, Digital Performer, all that sort of stuff. Then kind of shifted to doing more live sound, studio production. Nowadays kind of focus on production sound since about 2005. So that's working documentaries, corporate commercial kind of stuff. And then of course, in the last 3.5 or so years, actually gaining more video skills and live streaming. So I work for a nonprofit, doing all their stuff, and we have a lot of remote teachers there, so learning a lot there. And nice to be part of this innovative time, and also work for Alex as well.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Jesse. Bill?
So I started out like many people here in radio. I had my radio days stuff. And then from radio, I moved into doing advertising work. I spent about a decade in radio. Then I spent about a decade in advertising, running a small agency. And then that kind of moved off into video as video became a desktop video kind of circumstance. So I ended up doing a lot of spots and commercials first, and that kind of got me really interested in it. I became one of the early Final Cut original users, and that kind of spun me into doing a lot of consulting and talking to people, and I started punditizing on the internet about how things were changing. That got me a gig at Video Maker magazine, where I spent about 10 years writing the computer editing column there. Then I moved off into kind of semi-retirement, got back into advertising. Now I mostly edit, and I mostly do edit for corporate clients here. I thought I was going to slip out of it as I moved from my original home in Scottsdale, Arizona, out to San Diego, but weirdly, I'm more busy than I've ever been in my life, and I can't figure out how to stop working. That's me.
Thanks, Bill. Stuart.
Oh, I'm the token Aussie here tonight, and wasn't really ready for that. I'm the person who takes the road less traveled. I choose different things to other people for reasons that I can't even figure out myself. I started with video cameras when I was handed one at a Christmas party and said, here, you try it, and turned out I could do it. I sold my first photos at 17. I joined the student TV group at RMIT when I was there and ended up a life member for what I could do in a studio. I did my first 3D animation using the persistence of vision ray tracer in the early 90s, and that's all Boolean algebra, kids, so stay at home and learn your math. I've worked in radio, TV, I've worked behind the counter at a petrol station, I've done security guard, concierge, and other things, and even pizza delivery driver to put money on the table. Most recently, I've ended up being freelance cinematographer. I'm a Pentaxian and a Scion shooter, and yeah, I can burp at the start of the credits, fart, and dance with the camera on my shoulder and run upstairs in heels.
We were fortunate not to actually quite get that into the show. That was good. It was
Oh,
it was
thank you.
right
That was
before I hit
embarrassing.
live. Right before I hit live, I was like, "Whoa!" Anyway, so Dave Node.
Sure. I fell in love with technical theater in high school. I started my first sound and lighting company while in high school. While in high school and college, I worked for 5 seasons at one theme park and 2 years at another. I swept floors at an install company that turned into lots of soldering and installing of dozens of sound systems in churches and courthouses and such. I worked with the local crew at the concert shed, got to see all the 80s hair bands close up and personal. I was a music ministries equipment manager for Oral Roberts University. After I graduated with my degree in technical theater and design, I worked for a couple of production companies before taking my business I started in high school full time. And I provided Mac support for 2 textile manufacturers in the area and launched a web design firm in that stage of my life. I've produced lots of contents for theme parks around the world. I built a dozen video edit suites, started as a Media 100 value-added reseller and converted to Final Cut. Edited corporate broadcasts, sports shows, music videos on BET and whatnot. Bank of America's national AV firm hired me to handle one of their challenging clients, and I developed a Final Cut based playback system years before Playback Pro. I know I'm out of time, so right now I've been crisscrossing the country doing events for Merrill Lynch, and I'm an APSNACE certified LED engineer on the Infocom conference faculty, and I'm still the only freelance Barco Event Master version 7 top-level certified operator in the world.
Very good. Thanks, Dave. Guy, go ahead.
Yeah, I started out in basically custom printing of prints, traditional darkroom photography. So that was back in 1995. And eventually started my own company in 99 doing streaming video, encoding video with Media Cleaner. I worked for a service bureau doing a lot of scanning of large images, had Quadra 950s and working on 120 megabyte files. So a lot of print, a lot of scanning, doing stuff for Starbucks, Nordstrom, some of the bigger names. Year 2000, went to work for DV Creators as a trainer, traveled across the country, went actually every major city in the United States, Canada, Mexico, Africa, teaching Final Cut Pro. 2004, started DV eStore, which is a reseller of a lot of the goods that you guys are playing with. Blackmagic, we're one of the biggest on the West Coast. And that's about it.
Thanks, Guy. Chris, Comfort.
Yeah, started as a keyboardist in a band in high school, alt rock stuff, late 80s, went into college, music education and composition, dropped out, became a professional model for 20 years out of the last 26 years, which led into acting, which led into audio post, music composition for short films, feature film, horror film trailers, stuff like that. Dance performances at the Fringe Festival, which also led to being an actor in motion capture. So I've done most of Rockstar Games' last several releases, Red Dead 1 and 2, Grand Theft Auto 5, what else? LA Noire, and then let's see. One of my biggest modeling jobs was I was a Gillette guy for 2005 and 2006 all over the world. I also met Brett Favre for Wrangler jeans. I was on that. And I got into photography 5 years ago and videography. I was also producing my own comedy talk show on camera and editing. So, yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
So that's where all that came from.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. That's
Yeah.
great. Barry Brimmer.
I'm different path than most everybody. 1980, I was illustrator, logo design, did airbrush, all this by hand. And so 88 came along. It's like, oh, wow, Illustrator. It's a great thing. And so I've got Illustrator 88, got Photoshop. That's when I started Be Original. Grimer Enterprises became original artwork. So Photoshop when it was one layer and that was it. So I'd make a change 20 minutes later, come back. Then I got doing marketing and advertising. I don't know if anybody remembers IBM OS2. We did a lot of advertising for them. 94, we jumped into web development. 99, Apple here in Atlanta invited us to beta test this new thing called Final Cut. So we did. I started doing editing then. Mid 2006, we started a little video sharing service that you did overlays on QuickTime.
You're gonna have to jump. You're gonna jump to what you're doing right now because we're out of time.
Right now, I do video, photo, all that within the confines of marketing for customers.
That's great. That's great. Phil.
Okay. Wow. Like a lot of people, I had a full-time job as a DJ when I was 15 years old. So I think that got a lot of people into all this. It's interesting what the future generations will do when they don't have DJ as a starting point. Liked music a lot, went to Nashville, got an audio engineer recording degree, and then decided I wanted to be in film and television. Went to New York and got a film and television degree. And then the Macintosh came out and I fell in love, and everything needed to have computers. So then I started working with ad agencies and AT&T and NBC and ABC on a lot of their big events and integrating computers and graphics into their AV stuff. So that's kind of what we do now. Show and Tell is my company. I've got another company, Display Core, and we do a lot of video over the internet and digital signs and cool stuff like that. Have a lot of fun with it. So
thanks, Phil. That's great.
Yeah.
John Preto.
I like long walks on the beach, and I like wine.
Pina coladas.
We started our first streaming company in 1996, developed out of the medical imaging business in the 88, and raised $70 million Wall Street money for that company called Hello Network, 96. And then I went around doing PGA, LPGA, DNC convention, Kelsey Grammer, Joe Walsh, the Marine Corps, produced hundreds, not in the thousands, but hundreds. That company got killed off by the dot-com bubble in 2001, and then 9/11 later that year. We actually had a dot-com that was making money, but then corporate expenditure stopped. During COVID, we saw an opportunity to take Las Vegas style production and move that into the virtual event business. And so we have a staff of about 50 people, and we're providing content and entertainment into the virtual event business. But I'm a professional foosball player. I won the US Open 1990, and I did the first live stream from a rocket in 2001.
I still want to play foosball with you. All right. Leland, you kill me. Oh, you can't hear you, Leland.
It helps if I unmute myself. As a career generalist, like many here, I had a choice in high school to become an accountant because I was accounting student of the year, or play around like I was doing broadcasting to the alumni for the second 2 years of my high school. I went into receive a producer's license at United Cablevision, running vans, studio equipment, and editing equipment back in the beta days. And then in 95, took on my own business after being a civil engineer for 25 years now. I've been basically designing, building, creating all kinds of stuff throughout the years. I got back into video in 2012 when Hangouts on Air came out. And since then, I've been teaching live streaming. Wrote a book in 2017 called Best Live Guide, and was also #1 bestseller on Conversations Behind the Mic, co-written with Raven, the talk show maven.
Thanks. That's great, Leland. Mickey.
Oh, hey. Okay. Where do I start?
Yeah, I started out dabbling with in the live music scene, engineering for that, like back before college. And yeah, after studying, been doing production and post-production sound for narrative shows, television shows, advertising, and um corporate videos around Asia for the past 12 years. And I also do consultancy for IT infrastructures and production work, post-production workflows for post houses here.
That's great. Thanks. Brian Anderson. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm from Alberta, Canada originally. Now live just outside of DC in Maryland. Like a lot of people here, I go instead of going narrow and deep, I'll go wide and shallow on a lot of things. My background is in music theory and computer science, which in the 80s made no connection whatsoever. But as we can see, those things have come together. That was in Los Angeles. I was a guy who owned recording studios in Hollywood, took me under his wing and taught me to engineer. So I spent some time there working as a recording engineer, arranger, producer, playing French horn classically and otherwise in orchestras and sessions, and was a copyist back when you did that by hand with a fountain pen. Later, I was producing MIDI content for Hal Leonard and Roland and Disney, became a church music director at kind of the big churches with the band. And it was there that I got into video first on Media 100 and fell in love with After Effects. And since I'm running out of time today, I work at the University of Maryland, where I've set up a production studio for audio and video, creating e-learning content, a lot of green screen work, and do music here when I get a spare minute. And yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Brian. Alex next. Alex Goldner next.
Hello, I'm Alex, known as Alex 4D on the internet. I make Final Cut plugins, both for corporates, for broadcasters like the BBC, and also commercial ones that are available at alex4d.com, but loads of free ones as well, over 100. But essentially what I've done over the years is I'm interested in making tools so people can tell their stories and so that they can change their world. That's essentially what I've been doing. In 1982, 83, I wrote 4 books about how to program and how to learn the BBC computer. Got one of the first Macs that came to the UK, did a degree in computer systems engineering from 85 to 88, but most of the time I was doing graphic design at the university. Then I did magazine designer, art editor of a magazine in the early 90s, then joined an event company in 1993, doing Micromind Director, After Effects for title sequences for events in 1997, then video editing from 2004. And then much more motion graphics and stuff like that for big events around the world.
Thanks, Alex. That's great. I forgot about Macromedia Director. Yeah, it's Stephen Kimbrough.
That goes way back.
Kind of come out of corporate call center stuff, and since call centers do voice, I ended up grabbing video conferences, and when I saw video attack my call center network, I wandered into Pixel Core and met Alex there and learned about video so I could get ahead of it instead of being run over by it, which a lot of people in my position ended up having happen to them. And also figured out teleconferencing really doesn't work because it's usually 2 or 3 people that run the department want to talk to the department and not listen to the department. So we started doing things like that and still fighting with that, and happen to have about $6 million worth of Sony equipment sitting in London.
Thanks. Chuck.
Well, I went to school to learn radio and ended up falling in love with video. I was fortunate enough to go to a college where I got to do multi-camera theatrical shoots, and then got hired on. They had a nationally televised church program and conference center. So I learned conference AV, and then from that worked my way up to technical director at a large megachurch and learning all kinds of projection and editing. And then I joined an AV company and got to produce some really large events, including our city's big 4th of July, 15,000 people event. So video editor, a little bit of lighting, and now we've started doing virtual events and taking interactive virtual events to clients that are trying to move forward in this time.
That's great. Thanks, Chuck. Courtney.
Okay, where's Chuck Braverman when you need him? I started like Alex in radio in the mid 60s, about 66. Was on the air in San Antonio, Texas, KXL, then moved to Austin. Also stayed on the radio, KTBC there for several years. Attended the University of Texas, graduated in 72 with a degree in radio, television, and film. Surprise. And started a production company with some of my fellow graduates in Austin, where we produced a lot of commercials and training and educational films, things like that. Outgrew that market by 76. Moved to Hollywood, even though I had become a member of the union in Austin, Local 205. Go Local 205. And formed a Cine Technicians group there to work on features that came through town. Anyway, I moved to Hollywood in 76, discovered that the Sound Local, which I was doing production sound mixing at the time, was locked up tight, couldn't get in it unless you were born into it, didn't have any relatives, so continued to work non-union on low-budget features, things like that.
And I think that we're running out of time, but you got to tell me what you did, like what you did with teleprompters.
Well, I'm getting to that.
Well, we're out of time, so you got to tell us real quick. You got to tell us real quick.
In 82, while working in television commercials, came up with the first computerized teleprompter, CompuPrompt. That opened several companies around the world to do computer teleprompting services, and that was maintained doing that, and also got into doing video playback engineering, and did that on many television series for the last 15 years. Retired in 2015, although I'm still sucked back in every now and then, and I still have a teleprompting company in Los Angeles to do services.
Literally the teleprompter OG. That's all. That's Courtney Gooden, teleprompter OG. All right, Colin, go ahead. Next question. Next.
Hi, I'm Colin Hill. Like many of my generation, I was inspired by Chris's little PBS TV show in the early 80s. My first IT gig was teaching ex-cons how to use Microsoft Access. That was 93 or so. 95, I produced what turns out to have been the first ever internet stream of an NCAA Division I hockey game. And we ran that whole season starting in October 95. 1 month after the founding of AudioNet. I did it primarily because I was personally offended that AudioNet existed as a company, that people couldn't do this stuff themselves. So I went out and did that. And then did video following. My academic background is in economics and finance. My professional career is primarily revolved around open source software. The software that we developed was mostly content management solutions that were used for multiple presidential campaigns. In 2000, the John McCain campaign. We did projects for.
What was that?
Okay. Well, so we did projects for the Labor Party in the UK.
Okay. All right. We'll have to come back to the next one. You can't. It's not fair to everybody else.
Right. So in the last 25 years, I've taken on every IT role from desktop support to CTO, and now I'm doing startup mentoring for bringing my clients from startup phase to an exit.
All right. Thanks, Colin. Doug.
Hello, everybody. I actually started in 6th grade recording the middle school basketball games for the coach. So that's my start. I was also my buddy and I owned a DJ company in high school, did proms, weddings, and such. Got my BS degree in telecommunications from Ball State in video production. And right out of college, worked for a company I did an internship with, and I was an editor for 5 years. And I ran our 1-inch suite, which had 3 1-inch decks and Beta SP and 3/4 inch and everything tape. Many jobs later, my wife and I, current wife, decided to start our video company. We started with one camera, one light kit, and one computer, and now we have a 20-foot production truck and do broadcasting, streaming, sports, concerts, live events, and I'm just honored to be among you guys.
Thanks, Doug. I think that's great.
Sorry, I blew your timer there, Doug. I got distracted.
Yeah, go ahead, Katie.
Hey, I just tried to make it short and sweet.
No, it was perfect. That was perfect. I was trying to track it when I realized the timer wasn't going. Go ahead, Katie.
Thank you so much. Let me try and keep it brief. Welcome to the Katie & Co workstation, which is in our spare room in our flat on the edge of the New Forest National Park in the UK. I'm a former journalist, a former radio presenter, station manager of a radio station here in the New Forest. I retired from drumming and broadcasting when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis after 25 years in the business. So now I work from here. Doing a lot of remote stuff, tutoring, mentoring, remote support. I'm hoping to get more into the video production because I've been into videography since my father started me doing it when I was little. So I've learned so much here already, and I'm hoping to keep learning more in the future.
All right, thanks, Katie. Mike.
Find the mute button. Hello, I'm a retired senior technical architect at AT&T and currently looking for gigs as a contractor because I fell into Alex's office hours. I give technical presentations to groups and I'm a board member of Uniform Chicago. I've done stuff on home automation and podcasts. I worked at AT&T as a senior technical architect, designing and documenting the infrastructure for internal projects. And I was, before the network team lead at Ameritech corporate headquarters, where you couldn't get fired. Only I managed to figure out how to close that up by having them get bought out just because I was there. Along the way, I became a late blooming aviator and I bought an airplane. I founded the Pilotcast podcast in 2005, shortly after Leo mentioned podcasting. I worked before that at Ameritech Health Connections, building healthcare networks in 5 cities. I worked at AT&T Bell Labs, supporting the lab that developed the first symmetric multiprocessing Unix servers. I worked for well-known aviator and stock options trader Steve Fawcett, building his network in a back office for the first automated stock trading system.
Yep,
that's great. Company called VideoCart did the first IoT stuff. Technical support rep for US Robotics. I'm out of time. Bye.
All right, thanks, Mike. That's great. Go ahead, Paul. Go ahead.
Right, I got born in St. Louis, went to University of Illinois, got a BUP, bonus points if you know what that is. Went to the Louisville Courier Journal and Times as a photographer. Then I moved to California. I was with the Whole Earth Software Review, started a cell phone company in Santa Rosa, and then bought a house in Occidental. Then I moved to Austin, where I was a roughneck and a builder. And then I got a job with BPI Systems, one of the first software companies. I started the Spring.com, which was one of the first BBSs. Then I started the Small Home Village in 1980. And that was a fishing village outside Austin, which I have to this day. And I support myself with rentals. I started TexasCoworking.com, and I'm into ham radio. I'm doing the All Starlink network with Adam Curry here locally and internationally. And how am I doing on time? 1 second, boom.
Great, Paul. Thanks. That's fantastic. All right. Thanks, Jeffrey. You got your audio going.
I hope I do. Can you hear me? Okay,
yep,
my audio video might be a little bit out of sync, but here's the deal. So I started in about 95. I was at the University of Wisconsin, go Badgers, as a music major. I got into this little thing called Microsoft and Windows 95 support contract. So I supported all the Windows 95 machines over the phone for about a year. That got me in the track of IT admin. I was an IT admin for about 15 years from there. Jump up to 2004, podcasting started. That's when I started my podcast. I started my show Geekazine at about 2007, when I also lost my last job. I decided that that's where I was going to go. I started doing a lot of live streaming, a lot of video. Did a lot of live streams and video at things like CES, and I've done it around the world as well. It's been a great thing. I've also been a musician, so I'm doing a lot of influencing, including my music with my band Trailer Kings.
That's great. So first of all, thank you. It's amazing the incredible experience all collected into one panel. And this is just the panel. There's lots of people here that aren't here today. This is just the panel for today. And I think that one of the things that makes this conversation so interesting is that there's an overlap between all of us, but there are so many diverse backgrounds with technical backgrounds. Some of them intermingle. You know, a bunch of us did radio, a bunch of us did print, a bunch of us did some video, but there's also, I think it's the diversity of backgrounds that makes us able to answer most questions. I think we've got a couple questions. If you guys have questions in general that came up, not specifically for a person, but if you're in the attendees and you have general questions that might pop up, go ahead and throw them in there. I'm going to grab a couple of them here. Dale asks, how many of you have worked with Alex before doing office hours? Go ahead. What did we do, Bill? I know we did something.
You had me up to Petaluma for one of the Mac Break Studios.
For the Final Cut user, yeah, absolutely.
Right,
Bill Campen was on Final Cut, on the Final Cut user group. George, I worked with in DC. And
I chased you down at NAB. Does that count?
Yeah, exactly. I talked to you right at the bottom of the escalator. I remember talking to you about that.
That's creepy,
I remember,
Jason.
Yeah. No, I got to talk to Jason there. I remember that. And Stephen Kimbrough has worked for me a couple times. So he got to see our very early. Stephen Kimbrough got to see us grow because in our very first show for Salesforce, we were post people, but not really like live or build up things. So we had like, I don't know, these horrible little carts that we ran from our office to Moscone Center, like 2 or 3 blocks. It's ugly. So anyway, but yeah, so I think those are the folks that are here. I think those are the ones that I worked with before office hours. As Jesse mentioned, Jesse's working with me now. I've worked with Chris since then. Hosmuk has done some help. Alex, you and I have done some stuff together. You've been on Final Cut user group with me.
Yes, but a couple of years before that, I saw you working on a Google event that I was working on in London, and you were doing a live stream and streaming from lots of secret locations and stuff like that. But I thought, I won't interrupt him. He's having a busy time. I'll meet him next time.
Which one was that? Was that the one with drugs?
Yes. Exactly. So I did the graphics and the stuff for the stage and the general graphic design for it, and ran the show in the UK part of it. But I didn't want to bother you.
Was that the one? And that was the was it War on Drugs? It was one with Julian Assange, wasn't it? That we had.
Yeah, Russell Brand, Julian Assange. Yeah.
That was. We were only allowed to know what block he was in to make that work. Anyway, and then we had to. Someone had to come out and meet him. This is before he ended up in the Ecuador or whatever. Chris.
When did you leave the Market Street office? What year was that?
I think 2010.
Okay, somewhere in that era, I think fairly early on, Alutha invited me to come talk at Pixel Core once about using Photoshop for video. And that was the first time I met you. Yeah. And I remember within like 15 minutes of meeting you, you were like, you should go to Africa with me.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a dangerous thing. Especially then. I was going to Africa all the time. As soon as I found someone remotely useful, I was like, hey, I've got this great idea. Let's go to Africa.
How flattering. I was remotely useful to you.
Took you 20 minutes to be remotely useful?
No, I don't.
I finished my talk, and then
he was good. So Chris was really good.
You don't remember.
I do. Chris was really good. And anytime I see someone that I think was going to add to the school, like they get it, they look like they're adventurous and they know what they're talking about, like then I go, well, because the hardest part was bringing people down that were hard enough to deal with Africa, like just hard enough, like hardened, that I felt like they'll actually survive, and that but they have to also be really highly skilled. I didn't want to. The problem in Africa is you end up with a lot of folks that fly in that have good intentions but no skill. And so they go down to Africa. And so the thing that we've always been working on is finding people with good skill to bring them to Africa, to bring that skill set up. And that's been so Chris was one of the people that was like, yeah, I think he'd be useful. He'd actually
to be clear, I didn't actually go, but I was flattered that Alex Lindsay would invite me to be part of his extracurricular activities.
And generally it's someone that I identify that they know that subject matter better than me. So that's usually when I invite someone. It was always, it's not like, how do I, how do I do something less? They have to, if I go, oh, they know more than I do about that. That's usually when, and they fit this model. So Chris, even back then, I was like, he knows this better than I do. I should try to get him to come
back
with me.
then, the only trick to using Photoshop in video is you had to understand how to convert for non-square pixels.
It wasn't that trick. It was just the overall approach to it in the discussion. Anyway, Hosmo.
Yeah, no, I think you probably left Market Street in 2011 because that's when we met in 2011, about April. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, you're right.
You basically taught me this whole thing about our DNA is wired for visual learning. So that kind of thought is almost,
I forgot I took the bus so many years to back down because I was in Petaluma at that time, and so I just forgot that. I think I just erased it from my head of how often I was coming down to the city and how much I disliked it.
You still lived in the city when I met you. I want to say it was like 2004 or 5. Were you there that early?
Yeah, 2004. I was in the city the whole time there, and then I moved in. I lived in the office for a while because we didn't have any money, but for like 6 months. But when my wife came back from Harvard, then we actually got a proper apartment. She wasn't willing to do that.
Yeah, so, I remember you used to take the cable car. That was your commute.
Yeah, it was a great commute. Anyone do public access TV? Prema asks. Yep, some of us have.
I will say my favorite. It used to be back when public access was a bigger thing. One of my favorite things to do when I traveled was to find the public access and watch it. I loved it.
That's a funny thing.
A lot of people don't realize. Well, a lot of people don't realize they can go get that equipment and training and service and use everything at the public access unit for free. You just have to go there and sign up and be part of the team.
Yeah, go ahead, Stuart and Sky.
So is public access, is that PBS, and is that like community TV in Australia?
It's community TV. So basically all the cable providers have to provide a certain amount of money for public access to give some access to the community to make their own shows. And sometimes, and it depends on how big the market is and how well it's set up and what the taxes are set up to, because it's different for every market, but it is a requirement. So oftentimes the studios can be reasonably good, but some of them are pretty rough around the edges. But it's a great place to kind of cut your teeth on stuff.
That sounds very much like community TV in Australia, where a lot of people have come out of community TV and ended up in broadcast. I spent 11 years on and off directing a live motorsport news program and floor managing and doing camera, and now streaming when we've got streaming.
And I think it was before we had all these tools and they were really affordable and we could all have them at home. I think that the only way to get access to those tools was community access. I think now, I mean, we all have, I mean, not all, but a lot of us have ATEM minis and we have cameras and stuff like that. So a lot of the stuff that we didn't have there is there. And anyways, John and Sky.
Yeah, it was community access. It was called PEG, Public Government Education. And it was the franchise fees typically paid to the city that licensed or got the franchise. And this is when there was only one cable system in every city. It's changed a lot. And actually the whole idea of community public access is under threat now because the franchise fees that pays for them comes from a percent of the money from the cable subscriptions, not the cable internet. Here in Monterey, when we negotiated the franchise, when they rewired the city, they Comcast and putting in what they call an iNet. So the city owns a fiber network, which connects all our fire stations and all our traffic lights and stuff. But public access television is under threat within the U.S. because its funding base, which is the franchise fee, may go away.
Public access was the ATEM Mini and iPhone of the 1980s.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Sky. Real quick, Sky.
1994 in Oxnard, California, a friend and I wanted to review computers and cable access was a place we were going to do it, but I got to learn about and actually get the barrier to entry at that time was the equipment. You didn't have access to hardware, and the other barrier was distribution. We did not have YouTube or the internet. I mean, 300 baud modems would squeal and screech on bulletin boards, but that would be about it. So yes, cable access was the original opportunity to get into broadcast at a library level. But this
Scott, you asked question. You asked what overlap is office hours creating as a live TED Talk?
I do ask that question.
I don't understand that question.
TED Talk is a homogenization of entertainment, technology, and design, and we learn from one another's disciplines, right. And we open our minds up outside of our own little echo chamber. So I'm curious, in your community-based concept, you're open.
I actually
to, philosophy, psychology, and technology.
I mean, the one thing that I'll say about that is that I felt like going to TED. And so I went to TED Africa in 2007, and being there in Arusha was definitely changed the core of how I viewed things, because I was used to going to all these conferences. One of the reasons that I became very anti-tracks, like multiple tracks. The power that I saw, the couple things that TED provided that was really interesting was I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short one. They just wrote lots of short letters. So 18 minutes, and there's a lot of pre-production at TED to tighten you into 18 minutes and to produce a tight talk, and then some of them are only 5 minutes because Chris Anderson decided that 5 is all you need to say what that person's gonna say, or his team, and so the point is that it is. But I found that to be interesting. I also found it to be interesting that there wasn't a rush. They weren't trying to pack all the information in. They were literally creating huge spaces. So there was huge spaces between the sessions, be like an hour and a half or 2 hours of sessions, and then there's an hour and a half of space in between it to let the attendees all talk amongst themselves. Because and that TED makes it hard to get in, so you almost everybody that you walked up to was doing something interesting, and so you could walk up and start talking to them, and they really spent this time to help people tie together in a way that and I think this panel has proven that everybody's doing something interesting here. They people have self-organized, and we have an incredible rich background. So I think that this overall view of it, or the overall general thing, actually comes from TED. My interest in that is this idea that all of us thinking together is important. Ernie, and then
the other critical thing is that you've also flipped the horizontal experience into a vertical experience of a one-time thing into a horizontal experience of smaller and more continuous. So
and
again,
I'll argue that that's the future. Hosmuk, and then Ernie, real quick.
Have you the office hours formula or format that we are using here? Have you used it anywhere else before? Have you seen it used anywhere else?
I think that we've used it a lot in physical terms of having, open conversations about things, and Final Cut User Group was the kind of the genesis of that idea that we're not going to put anybody in the audience. So we've been experimenting with that for the last 10 years. And then we were pushing clients more and more towards getting the audiences smaller and smaller and smaller. So I think that I've never used this format exactly the way it's being used, but it's the evolution of a whole lot of tests, and a whole lot of community building at first in physical, then online, because Pixel Core was basically 2,000 people in 40 countries all interacting on a forum, because we couldn't do this. We would have absolutely done this immediately had this video been available. Hosmuk, and then Ernie.
Well, they say if you let loose dogs of war, you have to follow where they take you. So
yeah, exactly.
I'm having the session next week with this government allied thing, and they spent almost an hour with me trying to understand exactly the format of this. So I said, I'm not doing any slide decks. I want to see everybody, and we're going to have a question and answer session. And they just couldn't understand this.
Right.
So the entire
it's hard. It's hard.
Entire provincial government is not going to be in the session just to understand what this means. So you've lit a fire that.
Well, I wouldn't say that we figured it out yet either. I'd say this is a constant experiment, that we're constantly doing. And this didn't happen immediately. That's what I try to tell people too. The quality of this group and the quality of this panel and the quality of our conversation is something that evolved by doing this every single day. If we'd done it every week, it would be where it was. At session 30, we're where we are at session 1, whatever, 50, 60, whatever it is. Go ahead, Ernie. We're going to jump to some questions after that.
Yeah, just to support the TED genius, right, and that being in the room is that everyone wants to talk to each other. So even the trade show guys, I was there as an exhibitor, they were coming up to me. So, Richard Branson's family was coming to ask us, tell us more about what you're doing. And that's a remarkable opportunity to kind of just be more mutual in that way.
It is. And I think that, go ahead. Aaron.
No, I was going to move also to the thesis. I'm really in support of what this model is doing. So I think it also applies both to corporate. We should have regular conversations with brand communities, the same as we are doing among this social group. I think it's really, really an opportunity to, instead of have the annual conference, have a regular meeting, standing meeting, to have direct face-to-face contact with your fans, brands, community, employees, whatever.
I think that that's the end of broadcast, by the way. Like if that happens, if brands realize that they don't need to do conferences or town halls or other things like that, and they realize that daily or weekly interactions with their audience, with their employees, with all those things, if they realize that, look at how much time we're spending together and how much time we're not watching TV. And imagine if we had 6 or 7 groups that we're really passionate about, we'd have to start choosing between the groups, and we would not be choosing generalized, unsweetened oatmeal, which is what broadcast is right now. Chris, real quick.
This was foreseen in 1999 with the Clue Train Manifesto. I've talked about this before in the past, but it's still a website. You should go look at it. And it foreshadowed exactly what this meeting is and what Alex has been talking about. It is these companies have to understand that we don't need them as much as they need us.
Now, if they were smart, they would start it soon, because if they don't start it soon, they won't have anywhere to advertise, and they won't be able to, because we're about to see advertising just go and just disappear, like at the level that it's been. In the next 10 years, it'll be almost gone.
If Grant Petty just got online every day like you do,
oh yeah,
he could cut his advertising budget to 0.
Yeah, absolutely.
And be the most successful company in this space.
Absolutely. Ken Jones, heard about the people. Great. How did this group come to be? I missed the Pixel Corps. The Pixel Corps was this place that I constantly was having this conversation online all the time. And so I really wanted to have it back since I let it go. We had an online forum and we had mailing lists and stuff like that. And I just missed that conversation. And finally I knew where I was going to be for the next 3 months. I knew that I wasn't going to have to travel. The last 10 years, I've done averaged about 250,000 miles a year of travel to do all these execute events. And so I just never knew. I mean, literally, I would wake up and not know what continent I was on. And so I couldn't plan anything. I couldn't do this. I couldn't, and so suddenly I knew where I was going to be. And so I was like, well, let's see what happens. It was like, and then a handful of people here showed up. Mike's been here the whole time. I think he's the one. Have you missed any of them, Mike? Have you, no? Or
not
yes?
one. I haven't been
Not
on the
one.
panel every time, but I've been there every day.
Yeah. So there's been a hand.
Days? How many days, Mike?
Okay, don't tell. 163, I think it is today.
No. So
I want
it
to have
was,
a 200. I want to have a 200 show celebration. We need
we're gonna have to have some party. We'll have
balloons
some
and party and
it'll be near the end of
champagne.
the year. Yeah. The thing is that it was. I was like, well, we'll just see how this goes, and we'll see how long it lasts, and we'll see when I have to go back to work, but I hold it, obviously it's pretty important. I missed a couple because of production and so on and so forth, but most people around me, even my clients, know that I'm not super available between 6 and 9. And so unless it's an emergency, unless they really press down or there's a conflict that I can't fix, I'm here. So, it's my favorite part of the day. I really enjoy it. And so still, and go ahead, Leland.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment from my perspective on how I ended up here. I saw an email from a friend, John Preto, who was invited to this through email, I believe it was. And the one note I saw said, just show up. Sometimes you just have to show up. And a lot of us did just that. And I think it was that key component that said, you don't know what's going to happen. We came here. I've worked on I Do TV with Phil. It was a pleasant and ongoing experience, I hope. And John Preto, I and Colin have come up with Talent Pros Live, which is the event series we hope of the future. So it's that kind of thing that progressed just by showing up. So thanks.
Well, and thank you. And I want to thank everyone who keeps coming, because this is really not created by me. It's created by us. It is, the value of this thing that we do is because of all of you that are attendees, all of you that are in the panel. You know, it is the diversity, it is the, and you know, the system is a little bit designed to make it hard for people. Like we don't, at least for now, where, you know, you have to tell your friends and people have to put it up, and, you know, it's because it's, the idea is how do we build that core that is that keeps on providing that value. And I definitely appreciate all of you, you know, for being part of this crazy experiment that doesn't make any sense. It's almost impossible to describe. John, and then Barry real quick, and then we'll do a couple more questions. We're running a little heavy.
I joined the same way. Somebody said, you know, you ought to show up to this, but, you know, think back at the early days when you started this, Alex, and we were on Zoom, pre-Zoom bombing, all this. This group became an incredible resource of highly skilled people in this space, pushing on a product that eventually became a noun and a verb. And I think a lot of the things that you're seeing in Zoom now, a lot of the ideas were feedback from a talented group meeting every day on it and pounding on it.
Yep. Yeah.
Is there any way we can get paid from Zoom, by the way? Like just a couple of shares?
Free upgrades.
Yeah, didn't they make like $6 billion or something?
Go ahead, Barry.
You get the psychic experience, the psychic joy of knowing you were there at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Barry.
Yeah, the biggest thing I like about this, because we've been doing Zoom webinars since 2015, but I like about this, the meeting part of it, is that I get to fill in holes of things that I don't have an expertise in. And there's bits, and a lot of people here have a lot of sound information, which is great. That helps me a lot, the sound portion of it. But I do like the experience across multiple not generations, but years and years and years, and what each one brings a little bit differently. So I like that because of the.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is interesting that we get stumped every once in a while, but not very often. And generally we have so many verticals and so many, while again, we all talking around media, there's so much experience that we're able to come up with at least reasonably good, point people in the right direction with almost every question. And that's kind of an amazing thing. I haven't really seen that anywhere else, you know, and I think that's, again, the size of the group and the depth and the, you know, Paul?
What was the start date of this, and what were you thinking in the days leading up to it? How did it?
What were you thinking?
Come about? Well, yeah. What were you thinking, Alex?
So the thought process was, I know where I'm going to be. I have a bunch of clients asking about Zoom. I know a lot about Hangouts, but I don't know anything about Zoom. You know, I mean, I know how to do Zoom. Like I know how to basically do it. And I was already doing shows and figuring it out while I was doing them. And I was like, holy smokes, I got to start doing this every day, because otherwise I'm not going to understand the platform that I'm bidding on. You know, so I got to figure that out in a way that I can do it. And then I was also thinking, you know, I talk about all these ideas about, and we've done all these tests for other clients, but I really need to think about the Q&A process and the general. I've thought about participatory video for a long time. I'm just not like for instance, Mukana had been built years before and had been used for projects, but not, you know, project here, project there, project here. I didn't have something to kind of like really think about it, you know? And so, and then I missed the Pixel Core, and I was like, well, I've got 3 months. This will help me figure things out, you know, and, you know, left to my own devices, I would just do something like this all the time. So you know, so I figured this will be good. And so anyway, and I just put it early in the morning so that I could reasonably say I can go to work and you know, do my work during the day and keep this ahead of that time. Anyway, so those were the thought processes. And I've built communities, you know, for the last 30 years at some size, over radio, physically, Pixel Core, a couple in between. So it's like I've done this a bunch of times, and so every time I do it, it's kind of like restarting a system or reinstalling the OS, which is that I take everything that I did before, look at the things that worked and didn't work, and try something new and find a bunch of new things that don't work.
And the start date, what was the start date?
I have no idea. No idea when I
Mike
started.
Andrews.
Mike,
what was the start date?
Mike will know.
25th of March, I think.
Yeah.
25th of March. Yeah.
Ken Jones asked, if this gang formed one company, how long would it rule the world? I think how long we stay together. I think we all get along
before it collapsed.
Yeah. I think it's good for us all to.
Money would always ruin it.
Yeah,
As money
tends
gets in
to
there,
make
it'll
things
crash.
go, yeah,
You can't have a company with 29 leaders.
Yeah, exactly. Philip asks, he said, I'd like to know what children's shows Sky was involved with. Real quick, Sky.
Children's shows. We'll talk
Did you
in
say that?
Discord. I'm
No.
currently producing some podcast things, but
Oh, okay, there you go.
we'll talk.
John Well asks, finally, he said, Alex is interested in photogrammetry. What other technologies or innovations are on the minds of the panel? What else are we tracking? Go ahead, Alex.
AR. The iPhone seems to be all set up for doing that really straightforwardly.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
AR.
Yeah, John Preto.
Really interested in the ability in virtual events using AI to match people up of certain interests or certain transactional events that will crush the physical event world.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Chuck?
Well, along with what John just said, but also the ability to have I know it's starting to come out, but really get the links that are in the video player that can take you right to what you're looking at without having to be a separate window. Or, I mean, I like the way you're doing it with Mukana, but that overlaid links is something I've been watching a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason and then Hosma.
I think it's really just a matter of how insane generalist, like collectively this panel is. So for example, last week I was an expert witness. This week I'm creating a worldwide synchronized dashboard to track and display real-time output from an industrial extruder that's creating a brand new green building material. It's everything all over the place. But yeah, in a word, Apple Silicon's also pretty cool.
Yep. Hosma?
I want to be
You know how often I've thought of, do I really need to be on office hours today? So you don't understand, Alex, how addicted I have become. But more than that, we need to have a discussion on when my wife calls me and she says, are you with your second wife, Alex, there? When are you coming home?
Very good.
Really bad.
Stuart.
For answering the question, anything with robotics, telepresence, bionics, thermopolymer elastomers, and anything that will get me a job on one of SpaceX's trips as the cinematographer to go to Mars.
To Mars. Oh,
Come
one-way
to
trip.
Albuquerque.
He's at
That's
it. All
totally
right.
where they're going to take off, right in my backyard.
Colin.
And they are looking for Neuralink engineers.
Just
if
for a
you
change
wanna
of
work
pace, additive and subtractive rapid prototyping. If you have some time and some extra cash, go check out the E3D Tool Changer. It's a 3D printing, laser cutting, pick and place machine with some other fun little attachments. Great fun to mess with.
Very cool. John Hiddleston.
Mine's more theoretical, but I'm really interested in presence. What does it mean to be present, and how do you establish your presence and identity in this virtual environments that we are?
Yeah, Brian, and then Barry.
AR, VR, XR. I think there's going to be whole new ways of thinking about how to use that now that we can't be in spaces and be together, and teaching people with tools, which you all know is something that I think a lot about because of my wife's business. So that part, and then 3D printing, additive, subtractive, interested in that too. High resolution stuff specifically.
Absolutely. We're going to move really quickly because we're going way heavy. Barry, and then Leland, Bill, and then Guy, and that's it.
That's the reason I was really happy USDZ in motion and how you can start using it in other avenues, because web development, that makes a big difference in what people can see, because we do client machinery, and the fact that they can just sit there and spin it and stuff. So how that's going to integrate a little bit better and a little bit easier for what we do.
Yep. Leland, and then Bill, and then Guy.
I'm going to spend the rest of the year trying to figure out how to sing happy birthday on Zoom. That's my goal.
I got it figured out. I'm waiting for the next birthday. Well, I got it figured out. All right, Bill.
I am studying nothing these days but disruption. I'm trying to look back historically and see how people manage disruption, because we're in disruption right now, and I think we're going to stay in disruption for a long time.
A couple years at least. Guy, and then
story first, because that's what we've had since the sitting around the fire 2,000 years ago, telling story.
Yep. Guy.
Yeah, my interest right now is really hardcore into the Zoom room thing, because when you guys see how you can go from room to room, so I actually have mine to where I can auto auto answer at the office. So I can just drop in and then I can jump to another room. I can jump to another room, all from sitting right here. So when you guys get to see behind the scenes of how this all works, when you're just jumping from different places. So I used to have a thing called a beam robot where I could do this with robots and I could drive them around. So I had a couple of those. But now with Zoom, it's so
you
cheap
were the
to be able to
person
do.
who bought one of those.
Yeah, I had a couple of them.
I was wondering who that was.
You and Colbert.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys. That was a lot of fun. It was a fun second hour. So really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing with what you did there. And we will be back tomorrow talking about education. Remember Saturday. Oh, go ahead and hit it, Mickey. There we go. So we've got tomorrow education. Saturday is education, but also Final Cut in Motion. We'll talk more about USDZ. We'll be talking about lots of workflows, and it should be a fun time. So anyway, thanks everybody. That was a really fun couple hours, and I'll see you all tomorrow. All right, see you guys.